I'm a single man in my mid-30s, and what I'm about to share happened a few years back, during a particularly rough patch in my life. I'd just gone through a major breakup with the woman I thought I'd spend forever with. We were together for 5 years, and I genuinely believed we'd get married, settle down, maybe even start a family. But when it all crumbled, so did I. To say I was in a dark place would be putting it lightly. The breakup hit me like a freight train. I was emotionally wrecked. I spent weeks drifting through each day like a ghost, barely eating, barely speaking, forgetting basic self-care. I'd wake up in silence, work in silence, and come home only to collapse into bed and stare blankly at the ceiling. The weekends were even worse. I'd lock myself inside, skipping meals, watching movie after movie like a zombie, barely registering any of it. But enough of the sad part. I'm doing a lot better now. Still, there are times when I think about how different life might have been if things hadn't gone south. Anyway, it was a Saturday night. I was on my bedroom couch, lifeless, remote in hand, just pressing play on another random movie. My bedroom's on the second floor, and it's got a small TV setup, so I usually just stay there. That night, I was watching some throwaway action flick, one of those straight-to-streaming disasters that no one remembers 5 minutes after watching. At around 9:05 p.m., I glanced down at my phone. My mom was calling me for what had to be the 4th or 5th time that day. I didn't want to ignore her, but I let it ring out. I just wasn't ready to answer the same questions. Had I eaten? Had I gone outside? Was I doing okay? I knew she meant well, but I couldn't handle it. After that movie ended, I randomly picked a horror film I'd never heard of. The thumbnail looked old and grainy, just the kind of low-effort film you watch when you don't care what's playing. I figured I'd let it run in the background while I dozed off. About 20 minutes in, it became clear this movie was even worse than I expected. The audio was all over the place. Characters would mumble so low, I had to crank up the volume just to hear them. And then a sudden sound effect would blare so loud it felt like my eardrums were going to burst. Still, for some reason, I kept watching. Maybe I was too lazy to change it, or maybe I was curious to see how awful it could get. That's when I noticed it. A strange, metallic, clanging sound, like someone hitting concrete with a metal rod. It didn't fit with anything happening on screen. No metal, no pipes, no reason for it. It just played in the background every minute or so. Exact same tone, exact same volume. Too perfect to be unintentional, but too out of place to be on purpose. It annoyed me, but also kind of intrigued me. The whole movie was so badly made, I started wondering how something this broken made it onto a platform at all. Halfway through, I got up to use the bathroom. Oddly enough, I paused the movie, probably out of habit more than actual interest. When I came back and sat down, I hovered over the play button. That's when I heard it again, the metallic clang. Only this time, the movie was still paused. I sat frozen, staring at the unmoving screen. There was no dialogue, no music, nothing playing. But the sound had been real, clear, sharp, and it came from inside the house. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. I just listened, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. Maybe it had echoed in my head or something. But then, less than a minute later, it happened again. Clang. That exact sound. This time, I jumped up, heart pounding. I grabbed a small knife from my desk drawer and started moving through the house, flipping on lights, checking every room and closet. Every corner was empty. Nothing seemed disturbed. No signs of forced entry. Everything was just as I'd left it. But on my way back upstairs, it happened again. That sound, only now, it was fainter, which meant it was closer to where I had just been, my room. But I had been in there the whole time. Then it hit me. The windows. I'd opened a couple earlier that evening to let in the spring breeze. Maybe the sound hadn't been coming from inside after all. Maybe it had been drifting in from outside. Somehow, that idea felt even worse. I slowly approached one of the windows and nudged the curtain aside just enough to peek through. That's when I saw it. One of the chairs from the deck was sitting alone in the middle of the backyard, about 20 feet from the house, and next to it stood a child, a boy, maybe 7 or 8. It was hard to make out any details in the dark, but he was definitely too small to be an adult. In his hands, he held what looked like a PVC pipe. Just as I realized that, he lifted it and struck the chair, creating the sound I'd been hearing for the past hour. He had seen me. As soon as our eyes met, my body froze with panic. My skin crawled with fear. I know it sounds ridiculous, being scared of a little kid, but everything about it felt wrong. Why was he there? Why was he doing that? Had he been there the entire time? Was he mentally unwell? Was he lost? That would have explained it. But the longer I thought about it, the less sense it made. No one stands silently in a stranger's yard for over an hour hitting a chair with a pipe unless something is very, very wrong. I needed to act. I told myself he might be lost, that I couldn't just ignore it. I headed downstairs, switched on the porch light, and went toward the back door, trying to stay calm. My hand touched the doorknob, and I froze. Something deep in my gut screamed at me not to open that door. Why hadn't the kid called out for help? Why hadn't he knocked on the door or shouted? Why this bizarre behavior? That's when I backed away slowly. I moved to a small side window near the door and tilted the blinds just enough to peek through. I didn't turn on any lights behind me, and that's when I saw them. Two men, both dressed in black, crouched just beneath my back porch, waiting, positioned like they were ready to pounce the moment I unlocked the door. One of them turned suddenly and locked eyes with me. I dropped the blinds and sprinted for my phone. I dialed 911 with shaking fingers and rushed upstairs, heart pounding. As I reached the bathroom and locked myself inside, I heard loud banging downstairs. They were trying to get in. A few seconds later, a crash. They had broken something. I could hear footsteps moving through the house. Then, stairs. The footsteps came closer, step by step. I saw the doorknob twitch. Then, a violent kick against the bathroom door. I couldn't hold it together. I screamed that the police were on their way. Suddenly, everything stopped. The footsteps raced away. A door slammed downstairs, and then silence. The police showed up minutes later. I told them everything I could, but with no cameras and no clear description of the intruders, there wasn't much they could do. The only part that made them take it seriously was the child. According to them, the use of a kid in a setup like this wasn't something average criminals would do. It indicated a level of planning that made the whole thing way more disturbing, and that's what haunts me most. What was that kid's role in all of this? Was he involved willingly? Was he being forced? Was he okay? Every theory makes my stomach churn. Police said it was likely a random attempted home invasion, but the layers to it felt anything but random. Nothing's happened since. Life moved on, I've moved on, but I still look out the window sometimes, and I still wonder what would have happened if I had opened that door. It's 2024 as I'm writing this, and I'm a college senior about to graduate in a few weeks. Let me start with a quick rant. I've never understood how my friends could handle week-long spring break parties in places like Miami. Personally, I've always used spring break as a time to unplug, ditch the drama, the school grind, and just relax at home. This year was no different. I had just wrapped up a frustrating midterm and was fuming because my regrade request, which I knew was bulletproof, got rejected by my TA for no good reason. So I decided to go off the grid, head home, and decompress. It was Monday morning, and I didn't have much on the agenda aside from a gym session. I'm one of those morning workout people. It's the only thing that makes me feel remotely organized. So even though I had no real responsibilities for the week, I still set my alarm for 6 a.m. and dragged myself out of bed. By 6:20, I was dressed and driving toward the gym, cruising down quiet back roads through the suburbs where I grew up. It's a calm area, peaceful, almost too quiet. Not much goes on around there, especially at that hour, but then I saw something odd. Parked along the curb was an ice cream truck. No engine noise, no lights, just sitting there. It wouldn't have been strange in summer, but this was mid-March. Chilly. All the neighborhood kids were still in school. There was no reason for an ice cream truck to be out there at 6:30 in the morning. I slowed as I passed it, peeking into the driver's side. It was empty. Something about it just didn't sit right. Maybe it was because I couldn't remember ever seeing an ice cream truck in our neighborhood growing up. Not once. But I shook it off, went to the gym, got my workout in, and even grabbed breakfast on the way home. But when I turned back onto the same street, the truck was still there, same exact spot. That's when I paused. My neighborhood is the kind where people report things if they're even slightly off. A parked car for too long? Someone will complain. I've seen neighbors throw fits over nothing. So why was this still parked without anyone saying anything? Curiosity got the better of me. I looped around the block to pass it again. This time, someone was in the driver's seat, and he looked off. Long, sharp nose. A beard that looked like it hadn't been trimmed in years. His eyes met mine, hard and unblinking. I got a bad feeling, like he lived in that truck or something. I drove home and locked the door behind me. My parents were at work, so I had the house to myself. Hours passed. Then, sometime that afternoon, I walked out to check the mail. That's when I froze. The same ice cream truck was parked down the street, about 3 houses down. Same direction I'd driven from. It wasn't facing me, but I knew it wasn't a coincidence. I stood still, trying to process what I was seeing. There was only one conclusion. That guy had followed me home. I calmly grabbed the mail and went back inside, trying not to draw attention to myself. Upstairs, I peeked through the guest room window that had a better street view. There it was, still sitting there. I watched it for a while. No movement. But every time I checked over the next couple of hours, it had changed positions. Sometimes parked farther down, sometimes closer. It was like he was circling the block, deliberately staying nearby. I thought about calling the cops, but what would I even say? No crime had technically happened. Eventually, I remembered my older brother kept binoculars in his room. He's into bird watching. I found them and returned to the window. This time, I could see into the truck clearly, and what I saw turned my blood cold. The man was staring back at me through his own binoculars. The moment our eyes met, he dropped them, fired up the engine, and drove off. I freaked out. This guy had been spying on me and my house for hours. I finally called the police and told them everything. The strange ice cream truck, the man watching me, the stalking. The dispatcher was calm and said they'd patrol the area and keep a lookout. She even said, it shouldn't be too hard to find an ice cream truck. When my parents came home, I told them everything. They were clearly concerned but tried to reassure me. I went to bed early that night, totally exhausted. Then, around 3 a.m., I woke up. I wasn't sure why at first until I heard something faint. Music. That cheery, tinny jingle. It took a second to register. It was ice cream truck music. Quiet, but unmistakable. Then, something tapped against my window. Softly, like a pebble. That was what had woken me. Frozen in bed, my heart pounded. I told myself to move, to look, but every time I tried, my body locked up. Finally, I forced myself to inch toward the window. I stood to the side, counted to 3, and yanked the curtain open. He was standing in my front yard, the man from earlier. And beside him, one on each side, were 2 small children holding his hands. At least, I think they were children. It was too dark to see their faces. I didn't waste a second. I backed away, heart pounding, and ran to wake up my dad. I had already dialed 911 before he even made it downstairs, but by the time we went outside, the man was gone, vanished. The police showed up again, searched the area, and left with no leads. Days passed. I went back to school, shaken but trying to move on. Then, a few days ago, my mom called. There was a missing person case just announced on the local news. A pair of 6-year-old twins, a boy and a girl, had vanished from a neighborhood about half an hour from ours. And my mind went straight back to that night, to those 2 little figures standing next to the man. I don't know what he wanted from me. Maybe he thought I'd seen too much. Maybe he was trying to scare me. But if he really took those kids, wouldn't he want to avoid attention? Or maybe that's just it. Someone twisted enough to steal children doesn't think like the rest of us. My mom called the police again to share our story. I don't know if they'll find anything, but I haven't stopped looking over my shoulder since. This happened last spring, about 9 months ago. I work as a sales associate for BMW, so my schedule is always packed. Even when I'm not at the dealership, I'm on my phone handling follow-ups, chasing leads, scheduling appointments. It honestly feels like I do more work outside the office than in it. Because of how important each call might be, I have to answer every time the phone rings, even if it's a number I don't recognize. As you can imagine, I get a ton of spam, but I don't have the luxury of ignoring them. One night, just after 10 p.m., my phone started ringing. It was an unknown number. Normally, I'd pick up right away, but I was already in bed, halfway through winding down. Something about the late hour made me let it ring out. No voicemail came through, so I figured if it was important, they'd leave one. But then, a few minutes later, the same number called again. I sat up and answered. I was a little annoyed, but I kept my tone polite, just in case it was a serious inquiry. At first, all I could hear was static, thick, distorted fuzz. I was about to hang up when I heard something underneath it. A voice. I leaned in and listened. It was my voice. I froze. After a second or two, I realized it wasn't just a clip. It was a recording of an actual conversation I'd had earlier that day with a client. Basic stuff. Pricing, features, booking a test drive. Nothing private, but it was definitely real. And definitely me. I didn't know what to think, so I ended the call immediately. I just sat there, staring at my screen, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. I wasn't panicking, but I wasn't calm either. My best guess was that maybe the client had accidentally recorded our call and tried to play it back, somehow misdialing me in the process. It felt like a stretch, especially since the number didn't match the one from earlier, but it was the only explanation that didn't spiral into something worse. Still, for peace of mind, I called that client the next morning. He picked up right away, totally normal, cheerful even. When I asked about the call, he was confused, had no idea what I was talking about. I apologized and let it go. The rest of the day was uneventful. I met a few clients, made some follow-up calls, business as usual. I didn't think much about the strange call until it happened again that night. Another unknown number, different from the one before. I answered. Same thing, static, followed by a recording of me speaking to a different client from earlier that day. A new conversation entirely. No other voices, just me. I hung up without saying anything. That night, I couldn't sleep. The fact that it happened again made it feel intentional, and the detail that really got under my skin, the recording was one-sided. Only my voice played. It was like someone had tapped into my calls and recorded only my end of them. I started to wonder if someone was spying on me, recording me, listening in. For the next 7 nights, the same thing happened. Every night, always a different number, always static and a new call I'd had earlier in the day. I started recording the calls myself, though I didn't really know why. It just felt like the smart thing to do. By the 3rd or 4th day, it began to seriously mess with my head, not just in a creepy way, but psychologically. I became hyper-aware of everything, paranoid. I'd constantly check the windows. I started triple-locking my doors, turning on every light at night. At one point, I even dragged a chair in front of my bedroom door. During the day, if my phone rang, even for legit business, I'd step outside to answer it in my car, where I could see all around me. I know how irrational that sounds, but at the time, it felt like the only way to stay safe. Eventually, I went to the police. I felt ridiculous, but I needed to do something. The officer was respectful, but clearly didn't take it seriously. He said they could try tracing the numbers, but unless there was a direct threat, there wasn't much they could do. That made me feel worse, like I was all alone in it. Then, out of nowhere, the call stopped. No warning, no explanation. At first, I felt relieved, but after a couple of days, the silence started eating at me. I couldn't tell if it was over or if something worse was coming. I started spiraling. My mom has schizophrenia, so it made me wonder, could I be losing it too? Eventually, I changed my phone number. Huge headache. Had to reach out to clients, update all my records, redo everything, but I couldn't shake the feeling that my old number had been compromised somehow. For a while, things were quiet. Then one night, I got another call, different number again. Same static, same pattern. This time, instead of hanging up, I decided to speak. I said something like, I don't know who you are or why you're doing this, but if it's about money, I can pay. Just leave me alone. I gave them my address. I told them I was willing to meet. I know, stupid, but I wasn't thinking clearly. Fear had completely rewired how I made decisions. Then, for the first time, the voice responded. It was deep, synthetic, clearly altered. It said 11 o'clock, and then it hung up. I don't know what I expected. I loaded my handgun and sat at the kitchen table, waiting. I thought through every possible scenario. None of them were good. 11 o'clock came and went. No one showed. I sat there all night, gun in hand, barely breathing. That was the last call I ever got. I wish I could say I felt safe after that, but the truth is, that experience broke something inside me. The damage was already done. It took months of therapy and time off work just to feel somewhat normal again. To this day, I have no idea how someone recorded my calls or who was behind it. I don't know what they wanted or why they stopped. I've moved out of that house, started over, but even now, every time the phone rings, a small part of me braces for static, and that voice,